This man's name is Hanzo Hattori. But in truth, he was not a ninja. Yes, the man the world calls the ultimate ninja wasn't one at all. If that surprises you, it should. Because once you learn the truth, your entire view of history might just flip upside down. So who was he, really? Why did he become so famous? And why has history remembered him as a ninja? In this video, we'll gently peel apart Hanzo Hattori's real self and the image built around him, and explore, through a story you can truly feel, what actually separates a ninja from a samurai, the very real operation that saved Tokugawa Ieyasu, and why his name became legend. By the time you reach the end, you may find that your image of the word ninja has quietly changed. And more than that, you may begin to see why Hanzo Hattori is still surprisingly relevant today. Now, come with me. Chapter 1, What did ninja really do? Before we go any further, let me ask you something. What do you picture when you hear the word ninja? Shadowy figures? Superhuman abilities? It's a beautiful image, but not quite the truth. Ninja were never supernatural beings. Their work was far more grounded and far more strategic. They gathered intelligence on enemies. They searched for safe routes. They protected their lord. In modern terms, they were something like a blend of a spy, a bodyguard, and a guide. But here's the part most people don't realize. Ninja were never lone wolves. They moved as a network. They shared information, supported each other, and shaped battles from places no one could see. And that is where Hanzo Hattori comes in. He wasn't a ninja in the way people imagine. Instead, he had deep connections, especially with the ninja of Iga, and could call on them when it truly mattered. So rather than commanding from above, he connected people and made them function as one. In a way, he was closer to a ninja manager. And at the same time, he stood on the front lines as a samurai, holding both roles at once. Even then, that was incredibly rare. Chapter 2, The moment the battlefield felt different. So, how strong was Hanzo, really? Let me put it this way. He wasn't just strong, he was a cheat code. The kind you'd think was unfair. They called him Oni no Hanzo. Hanzo the demon. It sounds dramatic, almost mythical. But the reason had nothing to do with shadows or stealth. It was because of how he fought. He moved forward. Always forward. He charged straight into the enemy. And when everyone else retreated, he stayed. Until the very end. One moment, in particular, made that reputation unforgettable. The Battle of Mikatagahara. At the time, Hanzo served Tokugawa Ieyasu, the man who would one day unify Japan. But in that battle, Ieyasu's army was completely shattered. It was chaos. And in that chaos, someone had to stay behind to stop the enemy from chasing them down. It was almost a death sentence. But Hanzo chose to take that role himself. Now think about this. Who was he protecting? Not just a lord, not just a commander. He was protecting the man who would shape the future of an entire nation. Tokugawa Ieyasu. To Ieyasu, Hanzo was one of the very few people he could trust with his life. And Hanzo understood something just as clearly. If this man dies, everything ends. So he stood where the danger was greatest. And he didn't move. That is why they called him a demon. Not because he hid in the shadows, but because he stood where no one else could. A very different image from the ninja you might be imagining. Chapter 3, The night that changed everything. When people talk about ninja, one place always comes up. Iga. A quiet, mountainous region, isolated, complex, and difficult to enter. Over time, it developed a culture all its own. You may have heard it called the land of ninja. But the reality is more interesting than that. Iga wasn't ruled by a single powerful lord. Instead, it was made up of small groups of samurai, each protecting their own territory. Almost like independent teams. And ninja? That wasn't even a full-time identity. These were samurai who, when needed, took on covert roles gathering intelligence, infiltrating enemy territory. So Iga wasn't a ninja nation. It was a network of highly skilled samurai with shinobi abilities. And that structure made it incredibly dangerous. Because without a central authority, there was no clear way to guarantee your safety. And outsiders? They could be treated as enemies in an instant. Unless you had connections, you simply couldn't pass through. And then, one day, something happened. A moment that would force that very challenge. It's known as the Iga escape. Tokugawa Ieyasu found himself in a nightmare scenario. Surrounded by enemies, almost no allies. Survival seemed nearly impossible. And that's when Hanzo stepped forward. He said, "We go through Iga." Under normal circumstances, that would have been unthinkable. A place like Iga was not something you could just walk into. But Hanzo could. Why? Because he wasn't an outsider there. He had roots in Iga. And more importantly, trust. He knew the people, and they knew him, even within the Tokugawa clan. He was the one responsible for working with these Iga warriors. In other words, he connected networks on the outside and organized teams on the inside. Very few people could do both. But Hanzo could, so he used those connections. He gathered information. He found a path. With the help of locals, he guided Ieyasu through danger step by step. Avoiding enemies, securing safe routes. It feels almost cinematic. Like something straight out of a movie. But this really happened, and in the end, Ieyasu survived. From that moment on, Hanzo was seen as the man who protects his lord from the shadows. And that image became the foundation of the ninja legend. But here's the truth, that's not what made him extraordinary. It wasn't that he was a ninja. It was that he could move people, use information, and make the right decisions in impossible situations. In other words, he controlled the invisible battlefield. And that's where the real game was being played. That was his real power. Final chapter, the truth that quietly remains. So, why did Hanzo Hattori become so famous? The answer is surprisingly simple. He commanded ninja. He saved Ieyasu. And yes, his name sounds unforgettable. As a story, it was almost too perfect. That's why people began to call him the strongest ninja. But the reality is more nuanced and far more interesting. He fought on the front lines, while pulling the strings behind the scenes. He did both at the same time. Not just a warrior, not just a strategist, but someone who embodied both roles completely. And because of that, he was irreplaceable. That is who Hanzo Hattori truly was. And in a way, that idea still matters today. The future doesn't belong to those who master just one thing. It belongs to those who can do more than one thing well. An engineer who also communicates. A leader who still steps into the field. Someone not defined by a single title. That is where real value lives. Hanzo Hattori embodied that idea long before our time. A samurai who could also operate like a ninja, standing on the front lines while seeing the entire picture. Not one or the other, but both. Fully realized. That is why he survived and continued to succeed in the chaos of the Sengoku era. So was he a ninja? Or a samurai? The answer is simple, he was both. And perhaps that is the very lesson we need for the world ahead. That's all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the channel and give it a like. I'll see you again in the next video.